Hello, my name is Michal. I'm from Team Slovakia, which consists of me, Juraj, we are from the same university, and Miroslav, which is our colleague, and he will talk more about the history in games, and I will talk about history of the games in Slovakia. So, as I mentioned, we are from a university in Trnava, Slovakia. We have our own Department of Digital Games, which is under the Media Faculty, which means we are basically all over the place, from esports to streaming to everything else in between. But we also have done some homework as of studying the history of the games. And I will share some of our accomplishments and some of our future plans. We are working as for the games, development of the games that originated in Slovakia. We have two main sources. First one is like state-funded Slovak Games Archive, which only archives Slovak games, mostly from 80s and 90s. And the second one is like Czechoslovak the database that exists. And that has a lot more games, but it's not like state funded. There are some other initiatives we will talk about probably in the afternoon, because part of our history is joined with Czech Republic. So these Czechoslovak games are mostly studied here in the Czech Republic. Which brings me to this NGO called Herní historie, which means game history, that we are part of and we are working together. There is Wojciech Starkavidas, who is from there, so I hope we will talk about it later. And one of our first accomplishments is like this website, which is Game Archive, joint Czech and Slovak Game Archive, which is something maybe we can share some of our insight on how to develop such initiative in other countries that maybe don't have one yet. And as for the new games that are being made in Slovakia, we have this Slovak Game Developer Association. I believe many other countries have one, and this is responsible for like cataloging of the new games that are being made right now. So something that is maybe more important for us beyond the database is something we call local game experience. I believe this is a term that can be used not only for Slovakia but also for the other countries from the like post-Soc bloc, including the former Russian Union and other countries that were around. So we are looking at the role of the games in the history as something that is like on the same level in the culture as anything else. So we started like way before the digital game era, in the like prehistory of games, and we wrote an article about the history of gaming in pioneer organization, which were like these collective games played something like a scout organization or some other clones of this idea of young people getting together and playing games. So this is one part of this initiative to study games in history. The other one is this studying of digital games in the 80s, but still in the Soviet era. This is something that was mainly done by Jaroslav, who will most probably join us in the afternoon. So I can skip this one probably because he will talk more about it. Something he is also talking about is this specifics of market that both existed, and as our Russian colleague mentioned, this culture of answering to the Western culture was very popular also in other countries outside the Soviet Union, and it brings a lot of specifics that are worth studying. One of them is this we call it culture of ripoffs or cloning. It's like answering, but more like stealing. But it's definitely part of the gaming experience in Slovakia and many other countries. So it partly consists of the smuggled goods and partly consists of the various methods of dealing with the lack of games. So sometimes people even build their own devices on which they want to either create the games or play them. This is something we have already studied in some part, but it's not published yet. It's more of a presentation I can share with you if you want. And one paper, but this one deals specifically with the history of pen and paper games. So the history of checkmate game called Dracidopia, which is basically coming from the Dungeons and Dragons, the original one. But we did a lot of talks and research, and we found out that it coexisted with the original one, but in this smuggled version. Another thing we are looking into, or our colleague from another university is looking into, is the problem of localization. This goes both ways. One is that how Slovak games were localized for the other markets, which was not very common, but it happens sometimes. And is happening now. There is a project in which we are trying to translate some of the early 8-bit games for the English-speaking countries. And there is this problem of translating games into Slovak language or Czech language mostly. That was not so common, but it was also very culturally significant, because it was sometimes some kind of artistic endeavor on its own part, because it was not done by the companies that distributed the games, but by the local people who decided to translate the game, sometimes very in their own way. Which brings me to from what has been done to what can be done in the future. And this is something we want to share with you and invite you to participate on. And it is the study of the other elements of our culture, specifically for the gaming culture, and the way we play them. And these are some topics we want to study in the future. It includes this pre-digital games era with games, card games, and board games. It's just a rich history full of also rip-off and a lot of stealing and inspiration from the West. So this is something like a common theme for them. We are trying to see and not. It's hard not to see, really. And there is this pen and paper we already studied, and these states of organized play. There is a lot to study yet, because it's hard to see from the. We have a lot of books about it from the era, but you know they're what they are, and there are a lot of people who remember such play, but they were children, so their account has to be taken with some some precautions. And there are some people who organize them, and they are the most hard to talk to, because some of them don't want to talk about it, or they remember it differently from person to person. So this is something that needs more time and people. And also there are these history of the machines as such, which is something I personally like to do. And here we study the arcade machines, especially the one that were not original, because there were some little imported goods, but mostly they were transformed from the gambling machines different ways, or completely homemade, which is something that is really interesting to study, because there's just like few of them left. And also same goes for the computers, which is, as I mentioned, something that Miroslav will maybe talk more about. And there is also this field of home consoles. There was only one in Czechoslovakia, which was officially produced, but it came out late, and it was very pricey. So people took the other way and smuggled the parts from the Western countries and did their own devices, which is something very interesting to look at, because each device is something like artistically interesting. Okay, that's for me, and I invite Miroslav to talk about the historical games.
Thank you very much. So, hello everyone. My subtopic is Slovak games about history. So, first and foremost, I chose some concrete examples of games, Slovak-made games, that draw some inspiration from history, but do not actually focus mainly on any historical aspect. A magnificent example here is Blood Will Be Spilled, for instance, where you play as a mosquito bounty hunter in a Wild West. Yes, your reaction is absolutely on point, because I mean, who wouldn't want to kill other types of insects in a fake Wild West scenario, you know, using your mosquito sucking skills. Then, for instance, we have the sort of like psychological text-based RPG, Sacred Fire, where you are some sort of refugee from Caledonia, nowadays like part of the UK, and you are actually trying to fend off and to flee from the Roman occupation or Roman invasion. Then I can mention the House of Da Vinci series, which is some sort of like a puzzle game where you visit the Renaissance era Italy, based on kind of fake events, but with real people, you know, so some sort of historical accuracy is there, like yay, Da Vinci, but other things are mostly made up, like a functioning helicopter, for instance. Then we have an example of the asymmetric action RPG Vikings, Wolves of Midgard, or a kind of flight simulator / arcade shooter Air Conflict series, which is set mostly during the era of the Second World War and a little bit during the era of the War of Vietnam. Now, I have some amazing examples of games that actually do try to focus mainly on history. And what better example to start with than Juraj, our kind of Slovak national folk hero, of who is kind of this simile to Robin Hood. You know, the era is the early 18th century, and as they used to say, he used to steal from the rich and he gave to the poor. That person did actually really exist, but it was just a fancy highwayman. So he really did take from the rich and he really didn't give to the poor. But there is an amazing PC game about that, which is very easy, kind of like an action-packed adventure game. You explore castles, solve puzzles, rob pandurs, which are kind of, you know, the imperial police. We can say you liberate prisoners and, you know, of course, steal from the rich. It is really graphically very friendly, not very difficult game. And come on, it's Janošík. So my Slovak colleagues will definitely appreciate that. Then we have, I'm sorry? Polish too, of course. I mean. Then we have Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic. This game has surprisingly positive reviews, mainly on Steam. Over 90% of users or players actually do appreciate and say that this game is really cool and really interesting for them. So it is some sort of a simulator where what a surprise, you find yourself in a Soviet republic, and you can enjoy these specific unique experiences, let's call them like that. So you create your own industrial complexes, you build infrastructure, manage traffic, plan and build living areas, authentic Soviet buildings and vehicles. I believe many here would kind of be aware of this Soviet architecture / transport from our basic everyday lives in many places of Central and Eastern Europe. But in the West and in the US, it's kind of like this approximation of the life in the 1960s to 1990s, somewhere there, or early 1990s. Then we have another sort of simulator, we can say, Age of Pyramids, rather a new game, approximately 2 weeks ago. I think it was finally released, like a full game. Sandbox city builder, resources management, nothing too fancy. You try to create or build the most amazing Egyptian city that you can, but it's nothing new. It just does exist, so we can pretty much move on. Then we have colonize, and yeah, this is not the colonize screenshot. Sorry about that. It's still an early access game, and it is set in the first half of the 17th century, where you are pretty much trying to colonize the new world. So kind of like the Plymouth scenario, where there are bears and Indians or Native Americans, and hunger and cold. So you have to face all these factors in order to survive, so your settlement might actually grow and prosper. Then we have a unique project called Vývat Sloboda, also known as Vývat Slovakia. This is sometimes being referred to as the Slovak GTA, but it is it is quite far from that, so have no high hopes, please. This is set near the beginning of the Slovak Republic on its own, and you are pretty much a taxi driver who goes around Bratislava, Slovak capital, and you transport various people. And you hear their stories and their opinions and about people, about events, about political situation. So this, still not released, but it's planned to be released. This kind of provides you with the option of multi-perspectivity, having multiple opinions about the same event, same person, from different types of people, from different backgrounds, from different social levels, and so on. So high hopes. The last game that I will mention, Forgotten but Unbroken, so another game in development. The Second World War turn-based strategy, based or inspired by XCOM. Are we familiar with the XCOM kind of way of playing? Hopefully we are. Okay, yeah, I hear some enthusiasm here. So kind of like punishing, positioning your soldiers according to their advantages, and using cover, using special perks and so on. You are supposed to lead the resistance against the Axis forces, help to liberate Europe, and of course, like, the decisions of the player will be somehow included in the overall progress of this game. So once again, fingers crossed. The last part of my presentation is games in Slovak education. So inclusion in school subjects. After my doctoral studies at Communist University, I became a high school teacher. Yay. But it's really great. I really found my calling, and I figured out that, people like to play games, right? Since we do like to play games, the students might as well, and they do. It is kind of a surprise, but they do, and they do really appreciate when you bring some of their, renowned games to the process of education. So for the British Studies subject that I teach, I use Assassin's Creed Valhalla and its discovery tool. You might know that the last 3 episodes or Assassin's Creed games, they all have these guided tours experience, which is great. For national history, I've used Attentat 1942, a checkmate game, which is set in Second World War Prague, or occupied Prague, kind of like telling the story of a family, and you kind of decide, you hear about adventures during the Second World War. And when it comes to world history, for instance, Sid Meier's Civilization, I'm sure we are all familiar with this grand strategy that has a huge encyclopedia filled with information and many types of, let's say, gameplay structures that people or students can actually learn a lot from. Now, when it comes to extracurricular activities, I started quite a few things. For instance, I started after school clubs, history in PC games, where I pretty much let my students talk about their favorite history-focused games, and we learn from each other, and we try to kind of implement that knowledge and try to find some anachronistic information, for instance, in the, I don't know, Call of Duty series, or, you know, the Hearts of Iron. And when you hear a 12-year-old saying that he spent over 1,000 hours in Hearts of Iron, one of the most difficult grand strategy games pretty much ever made, your world starts to shatter. So I'm right there right now. So I'm quite happy about that. I quite often use strategies and hack and slash PC games with the other after school club, which I created, History of Warfare. We all know that violence sells, therefore there's nothing more to add. I also organize some discussions, lectures, and help with some voluntary projects. I can give you an example. For instance, I take a series, for instance, I don't know, Assassin's Creed. I choose some concrete examples, and I talk with people, with students, or with university students, or generally like people in pubs, for instance, who are willing and interested in this topic, about these games and how they portray some sort of historical background. Are they good? Are they bad? Is this really what pirates were using in the first half of the 18th century? Did they really have a grenade launcher? And, you know, all these very interesting issues. The last part, main drawbacks, of course, as majority of us knows, lack of funding when it comes to being able to use video games at schools or in ordinary education, hardware availability. Our Stone Age computers at some schools are quite approved. Time demanding preparation. If you want the methodology, or, you know, like the lesson plan being enriched with some history game focused activity, it's quite complicated sometimes. Previous game knowledge, imagine yourselves not knowing about many of these game mechanics or about the overall topics of PC games. It can be quite overwhelming for let's say novices or for people who aren't there right yet. And of course the mixed reputation of video games, because you can get addicted, then you kill people, and then why aren't you doing anything, you know, more productive? Also, they are stupid, and many other arguments that I'm sure you are quite familiar with. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.